But until you experience the losses, you have no idea about the emotional pain that you will experience. I remember I had been participating in Grace Place support groups, and in one of our support groups, the facilitator reminded us to never ask the question that we might not like the answer to. And that requires a certain type of restraint that I did not have. And one day, we were having a discussion. It was a heated discussion. And I asked my husband, who do you think you're talking to? And I knew then that it was the wrong question, because he looked at me as if to say, I don't know, who are you? And it took him a couple of minutes, and he said, you are my sister Christine. And that is such a devastating moment in time, where you realize that although this is your spouse, he does not know who you are. So that's a loss. But as the disease progresses, at that moment, I said, no, I'm your wife, Linda. And he said, okay, whatever. But, further along the way, it becomes, you have another loss. And that loss was, I could not remind him that I was his wife. And one day he looked at me and he said, oh, you're that nice lady who takes care of me. And I said, yes, I am. You can't go back to try to remind your loved one that, no, that's not who I am. And I had been in support groups long enough to know that as, in my situation, as a loving spouse, the only thing that I could do was accept my new role. Although at that particular time he was he recognized me as the lady who took care of him, there was still some recognition of who I was, although he did not know that I was his wife. And in the next, well, there are actually two moments. As parents, we don't like to say that we have favorite children, but my husband had a favorite son. So he had reached the point in his illness where it was very difficult for him to have everybody together, because it caused confusion for him. So I would periodically tell the kids that you need to come visit Dad, and and they would come one week. I'd get a week off, and they would come, and then someone else would come. So when this kid came, he's our youngest kid, and I told him that you need to come see Dad, and he got here as fast as he could. And I said, now we're going to do what we normally do on a Saturday, but what I need to explain to you is that when we visit your dad, I'm going to introduce him to you. And he said, what do you mean you're going to introduce me to Dad? I said, he doesn't know who you are. So I'm going to introduce you to him, and he'll be friendly, and you just accept it. And so that day, what we would normally do, I would pick him up on Saturday. We would go to breakfast, and after breakfast, we would go to the Goodwill store, because he liked to shop, which is another story. And after that, we would go to the movies, and after the movies, we would go to dinner. And he had reached the point where, in terms of eating out, we always had to go to places where the food was prepared. He could not wait for them to bring it. So we went to see the movies, and my kid asked, which movie are we going to see? And I said, we're going to see the Legos movie. His question was, haven't you seen that before? I said, this will be the third time, but your dad doesn't know the difference. But I told this kid, because he was an engineering type like his dad, he was a Lego person, so he loved Legos, and he could do all kinds of things with Legos. And I remember telling him that you'll get the inside jokes because you know about Legos. And So we did all of that, and this was when we went to dinner. This was a day where Henry was having difficulty using the utensils. He couldn't figure out what to do, so I was helping him eat, and my son got to observe all of this. So we took him back to the personal care home, and when we got to the car, my kid cried because he had lost Dad. And it was only in that moment that he realized that he had lost Dad. And the fourth time is when I went to visit him at the facilities, and I was there for 4 or 5 times a week. And I walked into his room, and the look of terror in his face was just beyond belief. And I realized that I had gone from him not knowing who his wife was to his not recognizing me as his caregiver, the lady who takes good care of him, to somebody that he simply did not know. And I took a deep breath and I said, "Hi, how are you? I'm Linda. I'm here to visit." And he looked relieved. And that was another evolution in my role as a caregiver. So, and those are losses that occur, and if you are not prepared, they become more devastating. And I say, if you're not prepared, I mean, if you are not aware in the educational process that these losses will occur, they are such a shock that you don't know if you can go on. Who am I caring for? I've lost my partner. But if you are a partner or a child, you move on and you assume a different kind of role, and you do it all with love. Someone once described caregivers as heroes, and I responded by saying, "That's really interesting, but we don't think of ourselves as heroes because we're not. We're people who take care of loved ones, and that never changes." Well, we know that Alzheimer's disease is a terminal illness. And I knew that my husband was dying. I saw the progression of the disease. But I think the person who was most surprised when he died was me. I just remember sitting there saying, "This can't be it. What happened?" And I remember his caregiver saying, "He just died." I said, "He couldn't, no, that's not true." And I cried twice. I cried the week before he died. He died on a Tuesday, and I have a support group meeting every Tuesday at 11 o'clock. So I would always go to see him on Tuesday before the support group meeting. And I was in his room, and I was moving things around, straightening up, moving his suitcase and doing things like that. And he followed me the whole time that I was there with his eyes, and this was something that he had not been doing. And at this point, he couldn't talk, and I would carry on the conversation and try to make him comfortable. And when I realized that he was following me with his eyes, I went over and I talked to him, and I looked at him, and I realized that death was really close. And I thought about it all day. And I called my sister, and I told her he was dying. And it was at that point that I realized that I was not ready for death. I simply was not ready to let him go. And this was on a Tuesday. Friday was his birthday, and he was not one who celebrated birthdays. He just didn't do that. I always wanted him to celebrate my birthday, but he wasn't real big on his. But I decided that since this was going to be his last birthday, I was going to do all I could to make it a special day. So I went out and I bought birthday cards. I bought about 30 birthday cards. And I signed all of the birthday cards from family members, friends, whatever. And I read every last one of those birthday cards to him. I bought him a birthday hat, and I just made it a big celebration. His son was, middle son was in town, one, the grandbaby, was in town, and we had a birthday party. We took pictures because I wanted my grandson to have a picture with his granddad that he could see one day. And it was the best birthday celebration he ever had. And I had a little cold, and I was running a slight temperature, so I did not go to see him on Saturday. And his caregiver called me Sunday morning, and said that he refused breakfast. And she said he didn't eat all day Saturday, but sometimes he didn't eat. She said, but this morning he refused breakfast. I said, I'll be right over. And when I got there, I knew. So I asked her to call the hospice people, which she did. And when you do the kind of work that I do, you know lots of people in hospice, in the Alzheimer's community. And the nurse who came was someone that I knew. And she came in and she examined him, and she said, we need to go out to the lobby to talk. I said, okay. And she said, Linda, you know what's happening? I said, yes, but I need someone to tell me. So she said, he's dying, probably within the next 2 weeks. And I remember saying, this was on Sunday, I said, no, he's not going to linger here. He's not going to do this. He won't be here by Friday. She said, well, he won't be here by Friday. He's just not going to do this. And he died on Tuesday. And as I said, I was the one who was in shock. And then I cried at his funeral. Those were the only 2 times that I cried. So do I grieve? Yes. I miss him. I miss what we had. But I also remember all of the good things. Caregiving is very, very difficult. You cannot imagine how difficult it is. And while I was working, this is my defining moment as a caregiver. While I was working, he was a client at Grace Place, and we had a very, very difficult morning. And it was just one of those days where nothing went right. He couldn't maneuver. Just horrible. It was just a horrible day. And caregivers know we have many, many horrible days. So I finally got him to Grace Place, and I was tired. I was angry. And while I was driving to work, I had this thought. If I had known 30-some years ago, before I married this man, that this was how our relationship would end, would I had married him? So I'm driving to work, and I was thinking about, well, if I had not married him, we would not have done this. I would not have the kids, and we would not have done that, and just all the things that I would have missed out on life. And by the time I got to my parking place at work, my answer was, oh, hell yes, in a minute. Would not have hesitated, because there were so many good things, and the good things far outweigh that short period of time that was Alzheimer's disease. And what you have to remember, if you've been married for a long time, we were married for 35 years. So for 35 years of that marriage, we spent 7 years in Alzheimer's. So that does not negate the other years. So thank you. We had a wonderful life.